You guys ready? All right. Let's call this March 10th Essex County Board of Supervisors work session to order. April, you do a roll call, please.
Chairman Akers.
Present.
Vice Chairman Gill.
Present.
Supervisor Hale.
Present.
Supervisor Henry.
Present.
Supervisor Magruder.
Here.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Perfect. First on our agenda, we have the social services budget request. Did you bring backup today?
Excuse me?
See, you brought backup, just
Oh,
in
I
case.
did.
We'll try to keep it cordial.
Well, thank you for that. Okay. Okay, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I just want to start off by thanking you all for your continued support. And if it's okay, can I start with CSA? Okay. So for CSA FY '27, we are requesting $1.7 million. That is a decrease from fiscal year '23 of about $305,000 and a decrease from fiscal year '24 of about $167,000. The breakdown for foster care, we anticipate needed about $105,000 to carry out fiscal year '27. Approximately $1.3 million for private day school placements, and approximately $302,000 for CHINS cases. We are requesting the maximum $16,268 for non-mandated services. Over the last 5 years, we have reduced our foster care population by more than 20. So we are down to 1 child in foster care. So if we look at fiscal year '21 with CSA spending, we spent $725,000 in foster care. This year, we're projected to spend $105,000. We anticipate spending much less than that. So I just wanted to highlight the good work that my team has done in achieving permanency for these youth, but also preventing other children from coming into foster care. We've had quite a few, well, a couple very court-involved cases that have required us to use prevention funding, donations that our agency receives. Our staff have put in quite a few manpower hours in working with these families and children to keep the children in their communities and with their relatives and to keep them out of foster care. So I just want to highlight that good work.
And I think it's important, Candace, maybe for the board, since they're not involved in the regular meetings, and I know you talked with our Commonwealth attorney about this, but we've had issues with social services with some of the guardian ad litems and things like that, trying to push foster care when it really wasn't warranted. And so I know the team has had to fight, kind of push back with some of that to keep them out of the foster care, so.
That's correct. We've had jurisdictional issues too, where we've had to go to court and fight jurisdiction. But we've been very successful. We've worked really hard, and our priority is to keep children with their families, in their community, in their school system, on their sports teams. And so I think that hard work is highlighted. You know, when we look at a decrease in over $600,000 this coming year in comparison to FY '21, that really shows the hard work that we've put in.
And that match, Candace, for our new board members, is that 38%?
That's 38.53%. So this $1.7 million figure, if you need the exact, it's $1,713,715. That requires a local match of 38.53%. The rest of that money is strictly state funding. And those are mandated services. So what happens is there's a FAPT team, a family assessment and planning team, that recommends services. And then those recommendations come to the CPMT. Mr. Gill sits on that team with myself, and the sheriff sits on that team. And that team, we are responsible for approving the funding that the FAPT team recommends. I think we've done a really good job at ensuring that services are Medicaid funded. If we get a service request to CPMT, we might say, well, we'll consider this if we exhaust all other Medicaid-funded resources. Or we might prioritize services. If we get a request for 3 or 4 different services for a family, CPMT might then say, well, we'll approve the most important 2 initially. We don't want to overwhelm the family, and we certainly don't want to waste taxpayer dollars. So we've done a really good job at kind of monitoring that spending, and I think that's why we're not seeing a huge trend down in CSA funding, because we've seen an increase in private day school and an increase in their rates as well. But we've done a good job at trying to keep our funding as level as possible. This fiscal year is going to look pretty much identical, I think, to fiscal year 25. We project spending about $2,000 more this year than what we spent last fiscal year.
The foster care, that is for the Foster Futures Program?
So
Or this is for a younger?
So we currently have 1 child in our Foster and Futures program. So this is a youth who is 19 years old.
Right.
She's eligible for the program until she's 21. We do have a second youth eligible for the program who just gained employment. She might re-enter the program. So with the Foster and Futures program, those foster care youth who age out of foster care can re-enter until they're 21 as many times as they need to. I know that drives our office manager crazy because she never knows when to cut checks and who to cut them to, but they're eligible. And so if they're working or going to school, the federal requirement with part-time education or part-time employment, then they're eligible for that stipend. It's like about a $700 stipend a month.
I think it's important to note in the foster care program, it used to be at 18, you were done.
Correct.
And you were out on the street. This is a program that, when you think about it, this is what families do to their 18-year-olds and, help them with employment, find their first apartment, whatever. And
Correct.
this is what that program does. So it's very important. I just wanted to point that out to our board members as well as any of the public that's listening, so.
Thank you.
It's a
And
great
just in
program.
addition to that, we also have a budget line. It's called ETV, Educational Trade-in Voucher. And that is a pot of money with no local match. And that money can help these foster care youth who aged out of foster care receive education until they're 26. So we can pay for, an HVAC certification or a laptop if they want to go back to school, or books or whatever. We don't get a huge amount of money. I have exhausted all of that money already this year with a youth who just aged out of the Foster and Futures program, who turned 21 last year. And so I used all that money. I requested more money. The state graciously gave me, or the feds graciously gave me more money. But we're just supporting him the best we can because he's one of those youth who aged out
Right.
and have no connections or
Right.
support from any biological family or any connections he made over his career in foster care, unfortunately. So there are some good programs.
Very good programs.
That Essex County has taken advantage of and push into our youth, so.
And thank you for also, because I know this has been something that we have brought up in the past, there are programs that the federal government will fund that the local does not have to, and getting it into the right, key, line, whatever you call it, has been so important. So thank you and your staff for doing that as
Thank
well.
you.
It is noticed, okay? I just want to let you all know that. It is noticed, so.
Thank you for that. Any questions about the CSA fiscal year 27 budget? That's the most straightforward budget. When things get complicated, that's with our social services budget. So
We understand that too.
that's what I'll go over next.
I would just add, if I could, Mr. Chairman, Candace mentioned 16,268, which is the maximum county mandated amount. I think previously we've been doing like $10,000, is that
Correct.
correct? But we could go to 16,268 to get the maximum match on that. Is that
Correct.
that's the logic behind that
Exactly.
increase. So it just makes sense to do that.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
good point.
And this fiscal year that we're in currently is the first year we've asked for the maximum. I came back and asked for an additional request for that $6,000 a couple months ago.
Right.
So moving forward, we'll probably continue to ask for the maximum. So if you're ready to transition into the DSS budget, I'd like to just start off by telling you a little bit about what we've accomplished over the last 12 months. So over the last 12 months, we have processed 1,042 SNAP, Medicaid, TANF-U, and child care applications. We have also worked 3,253 ongoing benefit cases. We have processed 857 energy cases to assist households in this community with heating and cooling. So that's huge. That's a lot. In the last 12 months, we have received 113 Child Protective Services referrals here in Essex County, 91 Adult Protective Service referrals, 53 screenings to assess elderly and disabled for services. So just to highlight our work, and we're doing a lot of prevention too, as I mentioned, just offering services to families to try to keep children with their families, and that's obvious based on our foster care numbers.
I want to put you on the spot real quick, Casey. I don't expect you to have this number available now, but I know when we started looking probably a few years ago, looking at the referrals coming in versus what actually stuck. I think at that time we were looking at like 30-something%. Do we know what we're at now about?
So as of last week, we were at 35% of referrals received in Essex County are screened out. Now, the state's expectation is that every locality is under 50%. So that means 50% of the calls that we receive, we should be validating for either assessment or investigation. We're at 65% screen-in rate. Of those cases that are screened in, I don't have a number for you. I was actually starting to pull data for a board meeting to present this, and that's why I know that 35%. But I can tell you that the work we're doing is meaningful work. We're doing a really good job at intake, and we're doing a really good job at screening our cases, so that when I say that, what I mean is we're looking at, is there a valid definition of abuse or neglect? Is the caregiver the alleged abuser? All of those criteria we're ensuring fit before we get involved, so that our involvement is meaningful, so that we're not wasting a family's time, we're not wasting our time, and closing a case, not recommending any services, closing a case unfounded. Our work is more meaningful.
At one time, for our new board members, I think, John, maybe you were on the call, or maybe it was Ronnie, that we talked to the state about some of the Child Protective Services things coming in, and why our ratios were so much higher than the surrounding area and then of the state. Now I think we're much better, closer in line from where we should have been, instead of throwing everything at everybody, more selective to what we give.
Yeah, and like 21, when I started here, we had looked at the screen out versus screen in rate, and that was just based on calls I got from the constituent complainant people at the state, from citizens, from the governor's office, from whoever, hey, why did you take this action with this case, or what happened with this case? And I started looking at things, and I couldn't make heads or tails of what was screened out and what was screened in. And so we just really honed in on the intake process and the screening process, and training our staff to use the decision-making tools that we're given to screen these cases. And I think we've done a really good job at identifying cases that need our involvement and identifying cases that don't. So,
Thank you.
yes. So if I could just take a second to explain how our budget works, because I know we have some new board members, and I usually do this every year, but the new board members might not know this information. So we receive a base budget from the state. That base budget requires a 15.5% local match. That base budget isn't enough to get us through our entire fiscal year. The reimbursement on that base budget is about 54% from the federal government and 30.5% from the state. Again, 15.5% local match. So our salary and operations is all 15.5%. Once we exhaust that base budget, we start pulling down what we call pass-through dollars. That is all federal money. There is no state money when we pull down those pass-through dollars. Historically, that has required a 34% local match. Due to federal cutbacks, for fiscal year 27, that local match is going to increase 7 to 8%. So maximum, once we hit pass-through, the locality will be responsible for 42% of that reimbursement that we use. So 5 years ago or so, when I started here, we were starting to pull down pass-through dollars in December or January. Sheila and I, my office manager, I've worked really hard in just watching our spending. I've got a new assistant director now. We're looking at positions. we're trying to utilize our money and stretch it as far as we can. We're trying to redefine positions to pay people more money, but maybe give them more responsibilities, but overall save money in our budget. So the last 4 or 5 years, we've been able to utilize our base budget until about mid-March. This year, we will not be pulling down pass-through dollars until about mid-April. So we've done a really great job in saving money and, stretching our base budget as long as we can. So moving on to our actual budget request for FY '27. Last fiscal year, we requested a decrease in our budget of about $105,000. This year, what you'll see is an increase of $90,000, and that is to support a governor's proposal to increase all of our family services salaries, all of their minimum salary. If I bring all of them up to where the governor proposes they'll be, that's about a 35.5% increase for all of my family services staff, so a huge increase. I will need about $90,000 to cover that. The only other increase you'll see in my budget request approved by my board is a capital request for about $6,000 to purchase a vehicle later in the fiscal year. We do have two vehicles now over 150,000 miles. One of them is literally on their last leg. One of them still gets around pretty well, so I'll hold on to that one as long as I can.
Only $6,000 for a vehicle purchase?
Well, when we bought our Traverse, Sheila and I pulled that information. We didn't put anything down on it. We just started making payments. So we just used that for half the fiscal year, what we pay now, and just asked for $6,000 to cover that. I think the previous director traded in a vehicle and got like $500 for it, but that was the only money put down on that vehicle. So the thought process was we would just do the same thing and just begin making payments.
So you're making payments on the vehicle through your budget?
It's
Yes.
better to do it that way because they get reimbursed
They get the
from the
reimbursement.
state, because we talked about purchasing it ourselves, but then we won't get the reimbursement
Right.
back, so it's
Absolutely.
easier just to have it on the books.
Yeah, you'll get that 84.5% reimbursement on that vehicle if I purchase it.
Absolutely.
Social services purchases the vehicle. You will see some, if you look at each individual budget line, you will see where I've moved money around, but just so you all understand, the only additional request is the $90,000 for the governor's proposal, which is still in the governor's budget. We don't know if that will pass, and the $6,000 capital request. I was able to lessen our attorney budget line by about $20,000 because of our decrease in foster care, so I added that to staff and operations. As long as I'm within the staff and operations budget line, I can move money around. It's when I get to services I can't. My board does require approval to move any money within those budget lines. So you'll see some money moved around, but overall just a $90,000 increase. So I've kept this board updated. I've talked a couple of times about the federal penalties. And I know Mr. Magruder is very interested in this.
I'm ready to pounce here. Thank you for bringing it up.
So the SNAP error rate in Virginia is high. And I have an exact amount here, if you give me 1 second. All right, so there's currently a 50-50 split for the state and the feds to support SNAP administrative cost. Those are the costs that it takes my department and every department across the country to administer the SNAP program. 15.5% of the state's 50% share is matched by each locality. The decrease in contribution from the federal government will be 25%. Overall, that's about a $90 million impact to the state of Virginia. We are very hopeful that the governor's budget will pass, as the governor's budget includes that 25% penalty, so that there will be no additional cost to the locality. It's looking very promising that it will pass, but again, we don't know until we get our final budget. But we're all very hopeful that that's going to pass and that money will be covered. If that money is not covered, the cost to Essex County will be about $22,000. Now, right now, that SNAP error rate is 11.5%. The state, each locality, I know my locality is working really hard to just ensure that that error rate stays down and that localities are impacted as little as possible for the error rate. So we're hoping to get that error rate down before it impacts anybody, and we're really hoping that the governor's budget passes with that being maintained.
How often do they calculate the error rate?
The total is calculated yearly, but it's a rolling evaluation. And each locality's calculation is a rolling evaluation. Kansas has recently implemented sort of a new way of evaluating, but now includes a variance as opposed to an error, which is doing quite a nice job in naturally bringing the error rate down. So if it's within a certain percentage, they no longer consider it an error, they consider it a variance.
So it's not point in time, it's ongoing. You can pull it up at any particular time you want to look at it, I guess. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, you can. Now, whether or not a specific locality has been evaluated recently, depends on when QC has pulled those numbers. So Essex specifically, as far as QC goes, hasn't been evaluated since 2023, I believe. We are reviewed by QC, we are reviewed by the state, and our last review, we had a 0 error rate, which was wonderful. But the last reported one, as far as Essex goes, was in 2020.
Gotcha.
And problematically, it doesn't really matter what the locality
Yeah,
does,
it's the
because
state
they're
that
penalizing the
drives it,
state.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I was gonna ask if the state has talked about any incentives for localities to try to get their error rates down.
So let me tell you what the incentive was. The incentive was to pay for localities who had a high error rate to pay their staff extra money to get their error rates down. So
What a deal.
So localities that were doing well didn't get any incentives, unfortunately.
Classic.
Yeah.
Candace, what's sticking right now for the board, and then I'll follow up with the question, is the fact that the committee on the budget has not met until they figure out what's going on with the data center tax breaks that they give. And until they resolve that, they're not gonna touch this budget. What that tells me, red flag big time, they're not gonna pass a budget on time. So my question to you is, if they don't pass a budget on time, we as a board are gonna have to be prepared on our budget. Do we need to come up with the 22,000 right off the get-go, and hopefully we'll see it come back, may or may not? Or is that something that's a little bit every month throughout the year?
So that is something that is reimbursed monthly.
Okay,
So that 15.5%, whatever percent of that overall reimbursement is SNAP administrative cost. The locality will be reimbursed per month, 25% less of that.
okay.
So over the course of a year,
It'll
you'll
be
see a
20
total of
$22,000.
$22,000.
Okay. Right. So it's not gonna be a huge financial burden for us if we gotta put it up until they pass a budget. This is what happened last year, they didn't pass a budget till late, so I'm just trying to tell the board, be prepared for the worst. It's always better that we can get through, knowing that, and then deal with it on the backside.
They will have to pass it by July 1.
And we should be okay in the social
Maybe.
services budget, you know, if we need to come back for reappropriation. I don't think we
Correct.
need to plan on that 22,000 yet.
No.
We may have to reappropriate it
No,
later,
I don't
but-
think, as long as it's paid monthly, and that's fine, because,
Right.
you know, you're probably 2,000 a month, I think we can handle that.
Yeah.
But just 22, we want to know ahead of time, so, thank you.
Yes, sir. That is all that I have, unless anybody has any questions for me about the social services budget.
Board members, any questions for Candace?
What is the DSS budget number, total?
I have it right here.
You're just talking about operations or?
Yeah, just the operations, and not the CSA stuff.
So, for operations, the request. So of course I gave Sheila the wrong one to print for me. This is plus 90,000. So we are looking about 1.4 million.
And that includes the 90 and the 6,000.
That includes the 90. If you need the exact amount, I can
No,
pull
it's
it
close
up.
enough.
I have the wrong one
That's
printed here.
close enough. That's
Okay.
just what I need, just, and that includes the 90 and the 6. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Or, no, sir, that's salary and wages. If you're talking about the one that includes the 6 as well, that is about 1.7 million.
Okay. Perfect.
Board members, any other questions for Candace? All right, thank you, Candace.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
All right, next we can get into our outside agency request. So this is just kind of a follow-up from our last meeting where we heard all the requests from different outside agencies. We had more in the book than we had that presented. And so this was just an opportunity for us to talk about how that should flow. We discussed a little bit at our meeting that, obviously we have to cover all the things that we have to cover, and then whatever discretionary funds we have left, we'll put into these programs. So it's just something we have to gotta keep an eye on. We really won't be able to make any decisions until we get our full budget pack to see what necessary things are. But it's just important, I think we all wanna give to everybody wherever we can, but at some point, we only got so much money in the bucket to give. Did any board members have anything specific of any of the outside agency requests that they want to discuss now? And we'll end up talking about it multiple times, I'm sure.
That's the key thing.
Yeah, I'm still looking at it. I'm sorry I wasn't at the meeting, but I've got my book, so I'm looking at it.
Yeah, we've got all the things, and we'll have a roll of what we did last year as well.
There were two requests that came in this year that had never been requested before. And they seem to be, and when I asked questions, it surprised me that people were traveling that far from Essex County, that many people. So I got to take the information from face value, but they seem to duplicate services that we already provide here. So I'm not sure that, especially this year with budget increases and everything else, that we've got the wherewithal to duplicate or increase that. So that just my thoughts. We may find out afterwards that we hit the lottery and that's fine, but I don't think so. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a tight year to do any kind of new.
I think so. So,
It's gonna be tough to fund what we have in the past,
yep,
much less anything new.
right.
But obviously, when we get down to find out what all we're required to do, and we see what we have left, and then, I mean, I like the programs that they offered, I agree with you, but they are somewhat of a duplication of what services are already here. Or close by. Anybody else have any comments about outside agency requests? If not, we'll go in the Youth Incentive Fund. We can always come back to this if we need to.
Well, the only other thing would be that I know some outside agency also that were here, our meeting, also went to the town meeting. And so I don't know what the town is thinking and discussing and all that kind of
Right.
stuff. So, but that should bear also on our decision that, especially these things that more are focused on town, which is fine.
Right.
They should be supported more by the town. That's at least the way I feel about it. It's not to say that we shouldn't support them somewhat, but maybe we should be looking at, funding them at the same level or funding them at some ratio, depending on how much they do for the town versus the county and that kind of stuff. Nothing specific, just keep that in mind too, that some of these requests are coming from town activities, and the town should be very supportive, and I think they should be, so.
I know we try to, in our minds, kind of run through a pro forma whenever somebody asks the questions. you're constantly going into your mind thinking, okay, well, what's the return on investment for what I'm putting in? Are the majority of our citizens gonna get the benefit out of it, you know, for what we're investing into it? So I think all those things get considered.
And some of those requests, you know, have matching grants, which, you
Right.
know, I'm more inclined to support things like that, or when their budget is not 100% dependent on this fund because they don't get any money from anything else, that's not right either, so.
Yeah, one of the things we did, both for Joe and Calvin, some years ago, a couple of years ago, we started specifically funding the schools at the SOQ level, specifically to what it had, so it could maximize the state dollars that come with that. And we've been kind of doing that pretty religiously. That seems to work, because it gives the opportunity to maximize that state funding. The only thing that changes with that, in that circumstance, take the schools, for example, with like your enrollment, for example, if your enrollment comes in under what you projected it was gonna be, then you're gonna get less money from the state, but the county's already obligated a higher number, and we wouldn't know until the end. So that's just something, that's why we started looking at going less than what the calc tool says, just because of what we've dropped over time. I'd much rather get a little bit of money back. I'd rather just break even. I'd much rather get a little bit of money back than not get money at the end.
The calc tool takes the emotion out of it.
Yeah.
It's cut and dry.
All right, Youth Incentive Fund. So I asked this to be on here. I had a visit from one of our outside agencies that had indicated they submitted a request for the Youth Incentive Fund. It was the Little League. And they didn't hear anything back from that. And so they're asking whether they should apply again this year, because they had learned that the Essex Youth Football got the full amount that we had put in there. So there's two funding amounts that were given to the Essex Youth Football. So I think we need to tighten up our parameters around that to ensure that maybe what we didn't specify is that the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee should be just that. It should advise us on what to fund and not have them approving the funding. So I think given,
They had
With
board.
huh?
Right.
Didn't have one.
I was gonna add.
They've got one.
Not according to the paperwork I got.
So
Hadn't met in a while.
we put,
Yeah.
because we put two people on that board.
You did.
You know,
But we don't know how often they met, do we?
They were not meeting
They
according to
meet
the
That's the
director.
point I think you were making.
So
Yeah,
the,
Right.
they don't meet at all.
so the,
Right.
yeah,
So then,
But that's part of the issue. We need to have that policy tightened up. If we're gonna put money into this fund, you know, we're gonna have to have some skin in the game and understand how it's being spent and whatever those parameters are. So I'm all about including money in there for different things that we need, but it was intended to be used like a grant, you know, to offer funding of stuff that just wouldn't apply for normal operations. And nothing against football or Little League or any other group, but you do wanna see it divvied up more evenly across all the groups, so we don't have one that's,
you will be.
right. Joe's gonna take care of it now,
Next first meeting. they
Right.
We'll
got
get the right person on the
Wednesday.
job.
but, yeah,
Kay and I met with Bobby Cosnari on that, we were on that committee to award that money, and Little League football was the only application we had.
right.
That's why no one else got one.
yeah, I think what may have happened is that somehow it didn't get processed through. Because he showed me the application they did from the Little League. And that's my understanding, is that we never saw it, so whether it got stuck on our end somewhere or what happened, I'm not sure.
So you asked me to take a look at it, and I worked with the IT department. If it was received, it would have been a hand delivery or a drop-off. It was not received electronically, just to provide that.
Yeah,
And they have applied for this year.
right.
Yeah.
So just something for us to understand our policies and how we're gonna do that. It probably should be best approved by us as the governing body. with the recommendation, similar to what the planning commission would do. Planning commission doesn't necessarily approve anything, they'll give a recommendation to approve or not to approve.
Yeah, I think we need to have the knowledge of that.
Right.
And otherwise we don't know.
That way we have.
And that's what happened here.
Right.
Would it be a question of, I don't see a date on here when these applications are due by. Is it all year that these funds can be applied for?
It does say 1 July, if I'm mistaken.
What opens
That's
up,
when it opens up.
Opens up,
Yeah,
right.
I understand that part. So anytime during the year, they
The
can apply for
12-month
this.
period.
I'm not sure if people realize that or not.
Yeah, and we didn't set any of those parameters, so it may just be something we need to look at another work session, just to kind of iron some of that out.
No,
So
I think that's great to go ahead and do it year-round, if they have a need, because you never know, They may get invited to a tournament that they didn't know about in November, or something like that. The other thing is I know the application, needs some updating, for sure, so, but other than that, I just think a little bit more clarity to people, maybe if this is is it on our website or whatever, that this, that this can be applied for year-round type thing,
I
or?
don't think it was
no,
ever
it was
marketed.
implemented during the budget process to
Yeah.
work through.
Right.
Because we had some big requests last year
Right.
for some capital type things, which
Right.
didn't really fall in operations.
Right.
Which is why we put that
Sure.
25 or 30,000, whatever it was.
I think there should be a tighter restriction, maybe submitted over to the board through my office, then we could put it in a process to where it
That's
goes to the advisory committee for a recommendation, come back to the board for consideration based on the recommendation.
And then we could have some tracking.
So we
too,
can
like could have
track
some
it.
dates. You
Yeah,
submit it in.
I think it's a great idea.
It'll happen in these stages, then you'll get a response
Yeah.
back, one way or the other. That way, at least people know if they're waiting for something, they can call and check and say, hey, I was just checking on the status of this application. If that would've happened, maybe, if they would've called, maybe they could said, hey, we didn't receive anything.
Yeah, you'd know because it's on the
Maybe
agenda.
you'd know, so,
Yeah.
just something we need to be aware of. So maybe we can set a work session up in the next, one of our next meetings, that we can maybe just hash out some cleaning up the forms, or maybe that's something the staff would like to take a stab at and bring it to the
As
board.
long as we know the parameters, what process you want, we can do that and bring back the draft for your approval.
And I can work with admin
I
to,
think the process that April suggested, that it go through, is the best option. That makes sense to me. Then that way, we know we have received it, then it goes to here, then we know to follow up, to come back, to be
Right.
presented here. I mean, seems logical. Let's use that model and write up a draft, and we'll review it to
I'm okay
approve
with
it.
that. We're okay with that, bring it to the board
I
for
think
approval.
that's a great
So,
idea.
That's the way it should be.
April, good with that, drafting up the
I am,
process.
you should look at probably the maximum allowable level that could be funded, because that's really the entire amount
Yeah.
that's funded to the line, so that.
And there's probably some stipulations in there,
Right.
like, we shouldn't fund them at 100% of their budget again. I like skin in the game, everybody should put some effort into and have some responsibility for either getting sponsors, getting grants, whatever, or, some general dues. I mean, just even if it's $10 per kid, it just says something that I'm gonna commit to this because I've got skin in the game, so.
And I think too, as we work on, sports complex and that kind of thing, I think we're gonna see different organizations that start to spring up.
Yep.
And I think you'll have a lot more asks that start to come in. So we might as well get it right now before it gets overwhelming.
I'm okay with April, putting things in there like that for us to review, and then we can, if there are any additional comments or whatever, we can put them in there, but,
Much like the planning commission reports up to your
Correct.
recommendation, if you want more information, you remand it back, and it's a model that works.
And you can tweak the wording so it's not as confusing.
We can make
Like you
it-
said, 25,000 is the maximum amount
Right.
for the entire fund,
That's
so,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, because I think we were hoping that it would grow over time a little bit, and that we'd carry some over and
Yeah.
roll that through, so. Okay.
We can put a revision date at the bottom, and you can revise it accordingly, right?
I can, or I can burn this one and start new.
It's gonna be a new budget cycle, so.
need a
whichever.
match?
I almost wonder if there's grants and things available that could go in to help fund that.
We know a guy, don't we, that could look
I
into
say we can
that?
always grow the program. to include Brian Seal.
Well, I know that when I was reading through the reports, if I'm not mistaken, the report talked about trying to establish a 501c3. That was in the Parks report. Did you see that, John? Which would provide opportunity to get other grants and other things. It's.
A lot of times, organizations like the Refuge and all have a friends group that is the 501c3.
Right.
And then they can bring in funds that way, so.
And you can work off other foundations and other
Correct.
things
That's
that
right.
way.
The
So
foundations
it
are
opens up the
popular.
window to a lot more funding for things like that. All right. Board members, do you have anything else on that? I think we've got clear direction now. If none, I'd ask somebody read us into closed session.
I move that the Essex County Board of Supervisors convene in closed session pursuant to Code of Virginia, Section 2.2-3711A3, for discussion and/or consideration of the acquisition of real property for public purpose and the disposition of publicly held real property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the board related to leases and use agreements, potential property acquisition, and sites for public facilities pursuant to Code Section 2.2-3711A6 for the discussion or consideration of the investment of public funds where competition or bargaining is involved, where if made public initially, the financial interests of the county would be adversely affected related to public facilities, public services, and interagency agreements, and pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A8 for consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel, including related to agreements, real estate transactions, and contracts, and pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A29 for the discussion of the award of a public contract involving the expenditure of public funds and discussion of the terms of scope of such contract where discussion in an open session would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body related to the improvement of government property and facilities and related services.
Do we have a second?
Second.
So one discussion point. Max, do we get billed for the word? Because I swear these keep getting longer.
You're all busy.
Stop adding things to the agenda.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're in closed session. Thank you.
Come back.
All right, get a motion to return into open session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. April, do a roll call, please.
Chairman Akers.
Present?
Vice Chairman Gill.
Present.
Supervisor Hale.
Present.
Supervisor Henry.
Present.
Supervisor Magruder.
Present.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Would somebody read the compliance certification, please?
Whereas the Essex County Board of Supervisors has convened a closed session on this date pursuant to an affirmation recorded vote, and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the board that such closed session was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now there be it resolved that the board hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, one, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirement of Virginia law were discussed in closed session to which this certification resolution applies, and two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed session was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting by the board.
Any member who believes that there was a departure from the requirements of clauses 1 and 2 shall state the substance of the departure that in his judgment has taken place. Hearing none, April, will you certify the board, please?
Chairman Akers.
I certify.
Vice Chairman Gill.
I certify.
Supervisor Hale.
I certify.
Supervisor Henry.
I certify.
Supervisor Magruder.
I certify.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to adjourn our work session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, our work session is adjourned. We'll convene back in 5 minutes for our regular meeting. Give us a quick bio.